walls have closed in on Senator Ronald Bato Dela Rosa in a decision that sends shockwaves through Philippine politics. The country's highest court has refused to shield one of its own sitting senators from the reach of international justice. Today, Wednesday, May 20th, 26th, the Supreme Court of the Philippines, voting 9-5 with one abstention, denied Dela Rosa's urgent plea for a temporary restraining order that would have blocked his arrest under an international criminal court warrant. The fugitive senator, whose location remains publicly unknown, now has no legal shield standing between him and a possible flight to The Hague. The Philippine Supreme Court convened in a special en banc session this morning and reached a decisive, though not final, verdict. The High Tribunal made its position clear. The interim relief sought by Senator Ronald Dela Rosa is denied. The ruling removes the last standing legal barrier that could have prevented Philippine authorities from acting on the ICC warrant at any moment. But the court was careful to draw a critical distinction. The Supreme Court stated the SC only decided on the prayers for interim relief. The main issues raised by the parties in their pleadings and motions are yet to be resolved in the main case. In other words, the bigger constitutional questions, whether the Philippines is legally bound by an ICC warrant after withdrawing from the Rome Statute in 2019, and whether local courts must first issue a domestic arrest order before foreign warrants can be enforced, remain open and will be argued at a later date. The court also announced that the full resolution, including the separate concurring and dissenting opinions of all justices, will be uploaded to the Supreme Court website on May 25. To understand the full weight of today's ruling, one must understand the man at its center. Ronald Bato Dela Rosa, 64, is a sitting Philippine senator and the former chief of the Philippine National Police. His nickname, Bato, Pap Tagalog for Rock, was earned through decades as a hardline police officer who rose through the ranks under the shadow of one man, Rodrigo Duterte. When Duterte was still mayor of Davao City in the southern Philippines, Dela Rosa served as the city's police director. Together, they allegedly pioneered a brutal anti-drug strategy that would later be unleashed on the entire nation. That strategy was called Oplan Tokang, a Bisaya phrase roughly meaning knock and plead, in which police would show up at the homes of suspected drug users, compelling them to surrender. In practice, critics say many did not survive that encounter. When Duterte swept to the Philippine presidency in 2016 on a law and order mandate, he immediately appointed Dela Rosa as head of the Philippine National Police. On his very first day in the role, the police launched what was called Project Double Barrel, a nationwide campaign aimed in official language at the neutralization of illegal drug personalities nationwide. Over the 2 years, Dela Rosa served as police chief, July 2016 to April 2018. Official government data places the death toll in anti-drug operations at more than 6,000. Independent human rights monitors believe the true number may reach as high as 30,000. Dela Rosa has never expressed remorse. In a statement made as recently as 2024 and later cited by the Office of the Solicitor General in its Supreme Court filing, the senator declared, "No regrets. Given the chance to do it again, I will do it again." The same approach. He was elected to the Philippine Senate in 2019, a position he held while the ICC quietly built its case against him. On November 6, 2025, the International Criminal Court issued a confidential arrest warrant against Dela Rosa. The charge, crimes against humanity, specifically the crime of murder, for his role as an indirect co-perpetrator in killings carried out between July 2016 and April 2018, the Way Cian Direct 2018, the Way Cian. Rant alleged that at least 32 individuals were killed as a direct consequence of Dela Rosa's command. Word of the secret warrant leaked almost immediately, and Dela Rosa vanished from public life. For 6 months, the senator was absent from Senate sessions, his location a mystery to the Filipino public. Then came the extraordinary events of May 11th, 2026. Dela Rosa resurfaced not to surrender, but to vote. Senate allies were attempting to install Duterte partisan Senator Alan Peter Cayetano as Senate president in a leadership coup, and Dela Rosa's was the deciding vote. He emerged from hiding, entered the chamber, cast his ballot, and found National Bureau of Investigation agents waiting for him in the quarters. What followed were scenes the Philippines had never witnessed. Dela Rosa fled through the halls of the Senate building, cameras rolling. Cayetano swiftly declared the Senate under lockdown. More than 100 of Dela Rosa's supporters surrounded the complex overnight, bled, occupying nearby roads and waving the national flag before being dispersed by police. For 2 nights, the senator barricaded himself inside the legislature, going live on Facebook to plead his case. Emotional, appearing tearful before cameras, he appealed directly to President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. and to his supporters. Dela Rosa said, "They want to fly me to The Hague. I call on you." I hope you can help me. Let's not allow another Filipino to be brought to The Hague, second to President Duterte, facing journalists outside his Senate office. He described the ordeal as the lowest point of my life. Then, in the early hours of May 14, came a moment that stunned the nation. More than a dozen gunshots rang out inside the Senate building as armed soldiers stormed up the stairs in an attempt to arrest the senator. By morning, Dela Rosa was gone, slipped away in the chaos. His whereabouts have been unknown ever since. Philippine National Police investigators later identified the suspected shooter as a driver working with the National Bureau of Investigation. Dela Rosa had vanished once more, this time with an entire nation and an international court watching. Even before his dramatic Senate standoff, Dela Rosa had filed a petition with the Supreme Court as far back as November 2025, seeking to block any arrest tied to the ICC warrant. His legal argument rested primarily on one point, that the Philippines withdrew from the Rome Statute, the founding treaty of the ICC in 2019, and therefore has no obligation to enforce its orders. His camp further argued that without a domestic Philippine judicial warrant, no law enforcement agency has the authority to detain him on foreign judicial instrument alone. Dela Rosa's lawyer, Jimmy Bonduc, said, "Kinikalala namin that it exists. Kinikalala namin jahala sa mata nila it exists. Pero hindi namin kinikalala na enforceable siya," which translates as, "We acknowledge that it exists in their eyes, but we do not recognize it as enforceable here." The government responded with force. Through the Office of the Solicitor General, the state argued that Dela Rosa had forfeited his right to seek judicial protection by evading arrest in the first place. Solicitor General Darlene Berbere wrote in the May 16 filing, "By his own conduct, he has placed himself outside the protection of the law. Until he submits himself to lawful authorities, he must be deemed a fugitive from justice and should not be allowed to seek any relief from the courts." The OSG went further, invoking the victims of the drug war, the faceless thousands whose deaths Dela Rosa's campaign produced. The OSG filing stated, "What makes this especially painful is the stark contrast with the experience of countless victims of Tokang. They were never afforded the luxury of interpreting the law for themselves, never given the opportunity to question whether force should be used against them, never heard before judgment was effectively carried out." Today's ruling removes the legal shield, but it does not guarantee immediate action. Justice Secretary Frederick Vida had already made the government's position plain before the decision came down. Justice Secretary Frederick Vida said authorities will definitely seek to arrest Dela Rosa and execute the ICC warrant. The Marcos administration, however, responded more cautiously in public. Presidential Communications Office Undersecretary Claire Castro said the court's order strengthened the validity of the process, but passed the practical question of next steps to the Department of Justice. The DOJ had previously stated it would move only after all Supreme Court issues were resolved. With today's denial of interim relief, that bar has been partially cleared, though the deeper constitutional questions remain very much alive. For human rights advocates, the ruling is long overdue. Wesley Santos III, executive director of Amnesty International Philippines, had called on the governor and to move without hesitation. Our new Without Hesitation writ said Dela Rosa held a key role in the implementation of the so-called war on drugs under the administration of former President Duterte, responsible for command and direction over the police. It is worth remembering where Rodrigo Duterte himself stands today. The former president was dramatically arrested at Manila's International Airport on March 11, 2025, placed aboard a plane and transferred to The Hague. He remains in ICC custody awaiting trial. No start date has yet been set. Dela Rosa was his right hand, his enforcer, his rock, and today that rock has no legal place to hide. The Philippine Supreme Court has spoken, 9 votes to 5, no temporary restraining order, no status quo ante order, no judicial shield. Senator Ronald Bato Dela Rosa remains a fugitive, his location unknown to the public. But the walls, legal, political, and institutional, are closing in with unmistakable force. For the families of the Thousa, Sendies killed in the drug war, justice has been a long time coming. For the rule of international law, today marks a pivotal moment in one of the most consequential accountability proceedings Southeast Asia has ever seen. The next move belongs to the Philippine government, and the world is watching.